incredible.
So in some sense, you don't want a single day of comfort. You've written about this many times. We'll talk about your writing, which I would highly recommend people read, in just the letters to shareholders. So you wrote up explaining the idea of day one thinking. I think you first wrote about it in 97 letters to shareholders. Then you also, in a way, wrote about, sad to say, is your last letter to shareholders as CEO. And you said that day two is stasis, followed by irrelevance, followed by excruciating, painful decline, followed by death. And that is why it's always day one. Can you explain this day one thing? This is a really powerful way to describe the beginning and the journey of Amazon.
It's really a very simple and I think age-old idea about renewal and rebirth, and like every day is day one. Every day you're deciding what you're going to do, and you are not trapped by what you were or who you were or any self-consistency. Self-consistency even can be a trap. And so day one thinking is kind of, we start fresh every day, and we get to make new decisions every day about invention, about customers, about how we're going to operate, what our even as deeply as what our principles are. We can go back to that. It turns out we don't change those very often, but we change them occasionally. And when we work on programs at Amazon, we often make a list of tenets, and the tenets are kind of, they're not principles. They're a little more tactical than principles, but it's kind of the main ideas that we want this program to embody, whatever those are. And one of the things that we do is we put, these are the tenets for this program, and then in parentheses, we always put, unless you know a better way.
Mm-hmm.
And that idea, unless you know a better way, is so important, because you never want to get trapped by dogma. You never want to get trapped by history. It doesn't mean you discard history or ignore it. There's so much value in what has worked in the past, but you can't be blindly following what you've done. And that's the heart of day one, is you're always starting fresh.
And to the question of how to fend off day two, you said such a question can't have a simple answer, as you're saying. There will be many elements, multiple paths, and many traps. I don't know the whole answer, but I may know bits of it. Here's a starter pack of essentials. Maybe others come to mind. For day one, defense. Customer obsession, a skeptical view of proxies, the eager adoption of external trends, and high-velocity decision-making. So we talked about high-velocity decision-making. That's more difficult than it sounds. So maybe you can pick one that stands out to you as you can comment on. Eager adoption of external trends, high-velocity decision-making, skeptical view of proxies. How do you fight off day two?
Well, I'll talk about, because I think it's the one that is maybe in some ways the hardest to understand, is the skeptical view of proxies. One of the things that happens in business, probably anything that you have an ongoing program and something is underway for a number of years, is you develop certain things that you're managing to, like, let's say the typical case would be a metric. And that metric isn't the real underlying thing. And so, maybe the metric is efficiency metric around customer contacts per unit sold or something. Like, if you sell 1 million units, how many customer contacts do you get? Or how many returns do you get? And so on and so on. And so what happens is a little bit of a kind of inertia sets in, where somebody a long time ago invented that metric. And they invented that metric. They decided we need to watch for, customer returns per unit sold as an important metric. But they had a reason why they chose that metric, the person who invented that metric and decided it was worth watching. And then fast forward 5 years, that metric is the proxy.
The
The
proxy
real
for
thing,
truth, I
the
guess.
proxy for truth, the proxy for customer, let's say in this case, it's a proxy for customer happiness. But that metric is not actually customer happiness. It's a proxy for customer happiness. The person who invented the metric understood that connection. 5 years later, a kind of inertia can set in, and you forget the truth behind why you were watching that metric in the first place. And the world shifts a little.
Yeah.
And now that proxy isn't as valuable as it used to be, or it's missing something. And you have to be on alert for that. You have to know, okay, I don't really care about this metric. I care about customer happiness. And this metric is worth putting energy into and following and improving and scrutinizing only in so much as it actually affects customer happiness. And so you got to constantly be on guard. And it's very, very common. This is a nuanced problem. It's very common, especially in large companies, that they are managing to metrics that they don't really understand. They don't really know why they exist. And the world may have shifted out from under them a little. And the metrics are no longer as relevant as they were when somebody 10 years earlier invented the metric.
That is a nuance, but that's a big problem, right?
It's a huge problem.
There's something so compelling to have a nice metric to try to optimize.
Yes. And by the way, you do need metrics.
Yes, you do.
You can't ignore them. You want them, but you just have to be constantly on guard. This is, a way to slip into day two thinking would be to manage your business to metrics that you don't really understand, and you're not really sure why they were invented in the first place, and you're not sure they're still as relevant as they used to be.